This is Alice, and you are in Gothic land. This is a live streaming. Let's see. Not yet. Right. Okay. Okay. Here we go. So we are live now. Yes, officially. This is my first live event, and it's going to be the first out of 10. Starting from today, we're going to be talking about all things Gothic. We're going to talk about what is the Gothic, what is Gothic literature, what is the Gothic mind. But before we start with all this, let's see if people start coming in, and if not, in 2 minutes I will start. Okay, you have to bear with me because I'm new at this. I've done a lot of sessions, I've gone to a lot of programs, but actually I've never done a live video like this, so this is very new as well. But this is a fantastic way of communicating, of contacting with you, audience, my followers, my friends, lurkers, everybody who wants to come here. You're all very welcome to come to Alice in Gothic Land, a place where I help you with your critical thinking. I help you with your Gothic literature, with your Gothic mode, and to overcome your communication fears at any level when you're writing, when you're speaking, but not just that, also with your fears, all the fears in general. So, right, we have 1 more minute, and let's start by saying that, well, thank you very much if you are watching, if you're here live, and thank you very much if you are gonna watch the recording later. And I've called this series of workshops Defining the Gothic in Modern Times. And the reason why I've done that is because when we think about the Gothic, a lot of times we think about the Gothic as the academic Gothic that we learn, or a university, or maybe you're thinking about the Gothic trend, which is something I'm going to be talking about in a moment. So I just want to clarify, because as a researcher, as a learner myself, I realized that I also had a few doubts when studying, when learning these. There's a lot of information, but a lot of times you cannot really find the timeline, the different periods of time, the characteristics, what makes the Gothic be what it is, how do I identify it, how do I know if I like it or not? Can I actually use this? Is it going to be beneficial for me? And this is what we're going to start doing today. But welcome now. Yes, now it's 8 o'clock. So welcome everybody again to Alice in Gothic Land. This is the first series, first video, live video on defining the Gothic in modern times. And not just that, I also want you to see how you can actually use it, how you can benefit from it. And it's going to be a little bit of a journey. It's going to be a lot of learning for me. Let's see if I get this right as well, if I can see you all guys coming in. And okay, so as I was saying, it's all, the purpose is for those who actually don't quite know what the Gothic is, but they have this attraction, like I always had since I was little, is to clarify and to set up some bases and to see how you can actually benefit from this, and how you can apply or use the Gothic as a tool for your everyday life communication, for your work. Maybe if you're a writer, maybe you write short stories. But not only that, life has got a lot of dark moments. It has a lot of areas where sometimes we need to find solutions, and the Gothic can provide us those solutions, those answers. Even if it's just for entertainment, when we going away from our reality and we want entertainment, we actually we're trying to find solutions as well to our daily problems. We create empathy with the characters. There's a lot of things that go on when we are in fiction, not just in the Gothic, but in fiction. So let's start by, as always, I love giving people definitions. So first I'm going to attempt, because describing Gothic literature is very difficult, and that's something that a lot of people attempt to do. But as one of the people I really admire in this area is Sam Hurst, Dr. Sam Hurst. She says it's not easy to define the Gothic, because by defining it, what we're actually going to be doing is leaving some aspects outside. So we're going to be not embracing all the aspects of the Gothic, and that would be wrong. But we can attempt at least to try to give some ideas to people for you to see actually what this is, how to identify a Gothic text as well. So this is a little bit of a brief introduction. It pretends to be a 10 minutes video, so I'm not going to extend a lot. This is just like a first contact to see where you're actually struggling, how can I actually help you with this. And I will also, since you're here, you will have access to a free PDF where down the rabbit hole, where I'm actually going to help you, or I actually help you with the 6 questions of critical thinking, how to use critical thinking in your everyday lives to communicate. I will give you 5 tips on the communication arena, how you can actually start doing something about your fears in communication, and then also 5 ways you can approach the Gothic and how this can actually help you. So let's start from the beginning. So let's start with some definitions. So the Gothic is something that has evolved, you will see. But what I want to do first is to ask you this question. What comes to mind when you hear the word Gothic? And this is probably already triggering some things in your mind. I'm going to go by the dictionary, so then you can see what different, if you were doing this on your own, it would you just say, okay, what is the Gothic? And you go to the dictionary and the online, and the first thing you come across is Collins. Collins has a few entries on the Gothic, because Gothic on its own is not just literature, it's not just architecture. There are other things we have to consider when we talk about the Gothic. So the first thing that Collins Dictionary tells us is that it's architecture and religious art produced in the Middle Ages. We can more or less agree with this or not. I'm not going to go into any more detail. I'm just going to tell you what the Collins Dictionary says. Another entry about the Gothic is that it's strange, mysterious stories that happen in dark and lonely places such as graveyards and old castles. Okay, we can tick that because we're going to see that is, or those are characteristics of the Gothic literature. The next point, the next entry is a style of printing or writing in which the letters are very decorative, and German books and signs were often written in Gothic script. So it can be a script, but it also existed as a language. It was also a Germanic tribe. It's also a style of guitar-based rock with some similarities to heavy metal and punk, and usually characterized by depressing or mournful lyrics. As you can see, you can already start having an idea. If you were not sure before, now this is gonna start making more sense. The next thing is fashion characterized, which is what most people relate to or think about the first time they hear the word Gothic, is fashion characterized by black clothes and heavy makeup, often creating a ghostly appearance, right? I consider myself pretty Gothic, and look at me, I'm not wearing all those things. Sometimes I do wear my jewels, but not necessarily identify with this specific type of clothing so much. So, and another thing that we have to bear in mind is not to confuse Gothic with small g and Gothic with capital G, with big G, yeah? Because we can refer to Goth as in the Goths, like the Germanic tribe, so that will be with capital G, but also Gothic as literary genre is also used with capital G. Normally when we're talking about the fashion, the aesthetics, it will be with a small g. But I think there is a lot of debate in the academia regarding this anyway. So it's something that is complex already in its definition. Right. So I hope this is more or less clear, but we will go more and more in depth as we go along. I just want this to be super straightforward and to start setting setting some foundations and some basic knowledge. Okay. The second aspect is that I want to talk about is the origins of Gothic literature, because again, there's a lot. We have some basic points. We have some things that everybody talks about generally, and we have some books that are famous, and we know that's the beginning. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So the first thing we have to bear in mind, that are inside the origins, I want to touch 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Okay, so the first point is that it's described as a literary movement which originated in England, right? This is the first already complex thing. In England, with the work of Horace Walpole, which is The Castle of Otranto in 1764. Now, this book, or the Gothic movement, was a reaction towards Romanticism at the time. So Romanticism, for those who don't know, was very concentrated on subjectivity. There was a high emphasis on the individual, and everything was like over exaggerated. There was nature, freedom, rules. It was when science started being important, and men started using other ways of seeing the world, but all under this lens of beauty and love and worship of nature. And there's this kind of return to medieval times. So the Romanticism will share some characteristics with the Gothic. So the Gothic, actually, for me, I always describe it as the naughty child, or the naughty sibling from the Romanticism, because even though it has these points in common with Romanticism, the Gothic is a lot darker. The same name we already can imagine, because we have references to that. However, when talking about the origins of the Gothic, we have to bear in mind a few things. The first thing is that it didn't just only happened in the UK, yes, in England. It also simultaneously started in other places, like in Germany. So we have to then think that it didn't just spontaneously appear there. It was a movement that appeared in various places at the same time. But what happened was that in England was a lot more evident, it was more obvious, it stuck for longer, and it made more of a noise in England than not in other countries. In Spain, for example, we had to do a lot of catching up, because we didn't receive things at the time where things were produced in England. We had our own Inquisition at the time, so we were not allowed, or there was a lot of repression, so people couldn't actually write openly like it happened in the UK, well, in England, let's say. So that means that, as I was saying before, just to go back and not to lose the thread, that it didn't just appear spontaneously. Things are always there already, but with different names, and but as Gothic, we have that starting point of the Castle of Otranto. For those who are not familiarized with this and want to know more, you can write to me. I can write the name in the chat later on. But it's the most famous, the first one, considered the first one. But we have to go back a bit. So it didn't just start there. That's like the main point. That's the first thing that we see. But before that, there were already what was called the graveyard poets, and that is the pre-Gothic period between 1721 and 1763. So you can imagine the graveyard poets. What did they do? They talked about the dead person, about the deceased. They talked about all the morbid aspects of death. So they would actually they would avoid talking about what happens to the body when you die, when decomposition. So that already existed before the Castle of Otranto. But the thing is that the Castle of Otranto is like this first very clear document that has all the elements of the Gothic, because of this initial Gothic that also looks back at the medieval times, and it uses a lot of references to medieval times. Right, as I was saying before, we can find also that in Germany, which is where the English took a lot of influence from the folklore, Germanic folklore, and the dark stories horror stories from the Germanic culture. We have, for example, that in the romantic novels like The Sorrows of Young Werther by Goethe, even though this book is romantic and all the elements are typically taught when we're learning Romanticism, we have this point in common with the Gothic when there is this sublime observation of nature, when there is this pain that he goes through because of the loved one not actually loving him back. So there are some points where Romanticism and the Gothic meet, and in Germany it was the same, and it started with Goethe was one of the main representatives, but there were already other stories and fiction that was written with horror. Okay, I'm not from the Germanic branch, so I will not be able to tell you more about that. But again, if you were interested, just let me know in the chat, and we can always find someone, a collaborator, that can actually give you more information about that. What I can tell you though is that, as I said before, that for example in Spain this was non-existent, in inverted commas, because there's always people who go back to writing this kind of thing. It's not that all of a sudden it existed and it appeared, as I said before, like a mushroom. The Gothic was already there in form of folklore, storytelling, because don't forget that monsters always existed, the dark elements have always existed since humanity exists, and we sat down around the campfire to tell each other stories. We've had this necessity or these fears, because at the end of the day the Gothic deals a lot with fears, not only with fear but mainly with fear, although as it evolves, and we will see that in the next sessions, it deals with other things as well. Okay, but this will come by the hand of the historical events, cultural events, and evolution and social problems, etc., etc. Okay, the third point I want to talk about today is why there is this difficulty of describing the Gothic. So there are many attempts, and I mentioned this before, but what Sam Hurst says, and I'll go back and refer to her again because she uses these terms. She talks about the Gothic as the literature of uncertainty. And that is so true, because when you're reading Gothic novels or you're reading horror novels that have got Gothic elements, and you find yourself in these moments where you're not sure where you are, where there's not a clear answer to the problem. We have a ghost, or maybe we don't have a ghost. We have our identity issues. There's people we don't know. We feel threatened. We don't quite see, but the things are there. You know, this ambiguity is what the Gothic deals with very well, and that is super complicated to, well, it's what makes the Gothic so difficult to describe as well. So to me, that means that it's a very good tool to use our critical thinking, because precisely when you are in these gray spaces, you ask yourself who, what, when, how, all the questions of critical thinking. You're asking constantly these questions, and by asking all these questions, you're moving your cognition, you are creating new pathways in your brain, and it's actually working. And you're analyzing constantly what's going on, because we have this curiosity as well. So it triggers our curiosity, and by triggering curiosity, we want to learn more, we create this empathy. So it's a great tool for your everyday life as well, if you think about it. Another difficulty we find is that the fact that, for me this is a difficulty, maybe not for the general academia, but for me the fact that there's like an expiring date for the Gothic, and they say that Melmoth the Wanderer by Charles Maturin marked in 1820 marked the end of the Gothic. What it marked, and I'm telling this and when I'm explaining this because when I was learning it, I was very confused about this. I used to think, how can it be that this is the end. If in fact I've been reading a lot of Gothic books after that, I can think of books that have got still nowadays these elements. And that I can answer to you, I can answer that later on if you want, but that has got to do a lot with the fact that it closes like this initial Gothic period where there are certain characteristics, and this is what we'll be talking about in the next days, in the next week, this week and the following week. And there are certain characteristics that actually make us put the different periods of time and where the Gothic actually appeared, and there were the books that were coming out. They were a reflection of society, were a reflection of problems, worries, the roles in society, women's roles, men roles, and all the things that came to play as well. So okay, so these are the 3 points. The Gothic really, as a literary genre, is what it is, and we'll have to follow all the different stages and phases. But actually, in this evolution of the Gothic, it has actually become more of a mode. This is what the academia refers to. It's a mode. It's not so much of a literary genre. In the origins, yeah, when we study the origins of Gothic literature, we find this there is a genre, but the evolution and what we have nowadays is more of a mode, because we still create Gothic texts, we still consume Gothic texts, and the Gothic is not just in books but in films and TV series. We find that in the otherness, in the uncanniness of our everyday lives. But all this terminology and all this is what I'm going to be telling you about in the next live events. So that's it for me today. I'll just summarize so it's clear. The first point I've talked about today was basically why we need it, and I've connected it with the critical thinking, your communication skills, and some main points about the Gothic, like definitions to clarify what it is. Obviously, it's probably easy to say what is not the Gothic than actually trying to define what it is. And this is something that my friend, academic writer, Gothic writer, Tracy Fahey, she says that it's quicker to say what the Gothic isn't than trying to say what it is. The second point, I'm trying to give you like the basic, very, very basic points of the origins of Gothic literature. Basically in the UK, influences from Germany, but in Germany it didn't quite evolve the same way as in England, and in Spain we got what we've got. And I will refer to the Spanish situation as we go, and I will be using as a reference a fantastic book I've got here. I will be using The Spanish Gothic by Javier Aldana, because he actually this book actually explains very well, and he compares very well the English space with the Spanish space. So the origins, yeah, there were 4 points for the origins, and the difficulty that we are finding nowadays to describe the Gothic. With all these, I hope that I don't see questions, but if you have questions after the video has finished and you want to comment or you want to ask, I will actually be very glad to answer to all those. I want to thank you for being here today, and for if you're watching this later, thank you for watching. I hope that you have enjoyed it. I'm going to post also a free PDF that I have for you down the rabbit hole that you can actually go now if you want to my webpage, gothicalice.com, and you will see it there on the main page. And there I will tell you about 6 aspects of critical thinking. I'm connecting all that with your communication fears, how to overcome those, and all that under the Gothic lens, so it can help you in your everyday life. So thank you very much, friends, and I'll see you again tomorrow, same time, 8 p.m. CEST. So this is Spanish time, Madrid time. Thank you. Bye.